Welcome back to Petrie in Prime. Tonight my guest is Knowlton Nash, who has announced his retirement from Daily News. It's the end of a Daily News career that started when a 9-year-old saw a movie about a foreign correspondent, and he decided that that's what he wanted to be when he grew up.
And here in Canada,
Nash did that and much more in his career that spanned more than 4 decades. He started in newspapers, but he made his name in television. First as a reporter.
I'm Knowlton Nash. The President of the United States has the most impossible job in the world. He gets more advice than anybody else in the world, from political pitchmen, from diplomats, from friends, and from enemies.
He served as a foreign correspondent all over the world, from Washington to Vietnam. And he distinguished himself at home with his work on the program News Magazine. But his name became a household word when he helped take the National from 11 o'clock to 10 o'clock.
The National with Knowlton Nash.
Good evening and welcome to our new hour.
For that and other achievements, he earned the Order of Canada.
And this weekend, Knowlton Nash signs off for the last time, at least as far as Daily News go. Tonight he is my guest. If you want to talk to him, you can call 1-800-665-1433 or 521-6285 if you're in Calgary. This isn't really like goodbye forever, is it?
No, but it's goodbye to the daily kind of surge of daily news that I've been involved in for so long now, and I'm going to miss that.
Well, I was going to say that's saying goodbye to a lot, because you get quite addicted to that, don't you?
I was interested in your comments about the Joel McCrea movie about foreign correspondent. The one thing I really did want was a raincoat like he had, but I don't think I ever really got one.
Well, now, you know, actually, I rented that movie last weekend from the video store, and I didn't...
Oh, did you?
Well, but I didn't get around to seeing it because, I don't know, something else interfered. But I had the same sort of, you know, I was drawn to the cover of it, and I thought, oh, boy, I'd really like to see that one. What did Joel McCrea do in that movie?
Well, he was trying to prevent World War II from happening, you see, and so that was what his undertaking was. He was fighting all the Nazis. It was just wondrously dramatic for a young mind looking for a career at that point. So that sent me off into the business of journalism.
Do you remember your first live news broadcast?
First live news call? You know, I can't.
I mean, if Saturday's going to be your last, when would you?
I should remember the first. Because I would have done radio. I remember the first television program I did, and that was the first television news report I did, and that was about John Foster Dulles, about 1957 or 58, out of Washington, because I was in Washington for about 18 years as a correspondent and working there. So I remember that quite well. The first radio program that I was doing would have been for News Roundup. I do remember, now that you speak of it, because I was in Kenya working with an international organization and was doing some reports for News Roundup on CBC about the Mau Mau. The Mau Mau uprising, and I remember I did 2 or 3 reports out of Nairobi for the Mau Mau.
Would those
that would have been 54, I guess.
Would those have actually been live, or would you tape them and they would be sent?
That would have been, well, it was live, taped to Toronto via London. It was, so far as I was concerned, it was live, because there was always a problem, as I remember, too, going out to the studio, because you had to go through some neighborhoods that were not particularly safe to go through, so you wound up making yourself pretty nervous as you went through that before the broadcast.
What about the first time anchoring? Now, had you never anchored before you took over the National?
Yes, I'd anchored News Magazine when I was in Washington as a correspondent for a long time. I'd fly up from Washington and do News Magazine anchoring. Sometimes Norman DePoe would do it, who was our Ottawa correspondent, and then I'd do it sometimes. But I did a lot of that kind of thing.
See, you just meant, I was going to get onto this later, but you mentioned them. You had so many fabulous colleagues in those days of report. I mean, people like Norman DePoe and James M. Menifee.
James M. Menifee, Don Menifee, who was my, I guess, mentor in Washington, who was a man of impeccable journalistic credentials and who had had a terrific career working for the Paris edition of the New York Herald Tribune in the 20s and 30s, and from Saskatchewan originally, but who really made an illustrious mark on the world of journalism.
And it was always so thrilling to me when he used it, when he did The World at 6 on radio, and he would say, and this is James M. Menifee. And I mean, I just thought he was the most important man in the entire...
He may have been. He may have been. He was a wonderful man.
In the entire world. But now, do you remember your first night on the National? Because you had been an exec. You had been out of the whole picture for, what, 10 years almost?
Yeah, because I'd been a bureaucrat. I came up from Washington as the director Director of News and Current Affairs for the CBC, for radio and for television, and so I've been out of active on-air work for about a decade before I came back to do the National. And so it was a pretty nervous moment. In fact, I swore then it would be much better never to have any first nights. Always to have second, third, but not a first night.
Did you get over the nerves?
Oh, you do in time. Sure you do. There's always a little bit of tension, at least I found that. I thought maybe if you ever lost that slight edge, that slight tension, that's the time to quit, because you really then aren't having the kind of drive that you need to have for this business.
You know, I was rereading the Prime Time at 10. I was reading bits and pieces of it. Is it actually true that the monitor, you know, which is the thing we have on our desk so you can see the news reports,
yep,
did it actually fall through while you were on the air?
One night it fell through smack on my big toe, and while I was actually on air live, and the idea of stifling my scream was really was hard to do, but I did until the item came on and I was able to yell a little bit in pain. But it fell right bang out of my big toe.
So it just went like thunk.
Well, you have lots of interesting moments like that. One of the more interesting ones relatively recently was we work out of a relatively rattletrap building here in Toronto.
That would be a nice way of describing it.
Yeah, it would be. And a lot of friendly mice are around. And I remember one night a mouse somehow got up on the top of my desk and then just sort of skidded across the top of it and down.
While you were actually broadcasting?
Fortunately, while an item was on the air, so he wasn't actually live on, but he came close. His timing was out. His timing was out. But we have a lot of friends like that in this building, a lot of mice. A colleague of mine just opened her desk drawer the other day and found two of them having dinner in her desk top drawer.
Well, we were just speaking briefly before we went on the air. Your retirement comes as the whole CBC is physically going to change. It's going to move into this glamorous downtown office building in Toronto.
Yeah, no mice there. No mice, no rats, no.
I don't know. I give it 5 years, don't you think? No.
Before the first mouse comes along, well perhaps, yeah.
I don't know.
We may import some of our friends down there, Georgie and Billy and Mary.
I don't know. I just can't imagine a bunch of CBC people being together for very long without, you know, growths of some kind that would attract mice and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Anyway, we have a lot of people that would like to chat with you, so why don't we start, and I can just throw in some things in the middle there.
Sure.
Let's start in Calgary. This is John. Hi, John.
Hello.
Go ahead.
My name is John Alexander, sometimes Jack Alexander, and Knowlton.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a party for you in Toronto when you returned from Washington to join the CBC.
That must have been at least 3 or 4 years ago.
Many more than that. And Knowlton, you are the most distinguished newscaster that the CBC has had since Lorne Green, and I think there was another intermediary whose name I forget.
Well, you know, it's really very nice of you to say that. I was thinking when you mentioned Lorne Green's name, I was thinking of another very distinguished anchor person. In fact, he was the first anchorman CBC ever had, the first network anchorman Canada ever had, and his name was Charles Jennings, the father of Peter Jennings, who now works for ABC in New York.
Gee, is that right? I didn't know that. You know
Charles
what?
was...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say Charles was an eminent and distinguished anchor person for the news in the 1930s. He was anchoring the news in 32, 33.